G'day and welcome. Today is July 31st, 2025. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard. We're coming to you live today. I'm in our Calgary headquarters here, but I'm going to bring in Alise Mills, coming to us from an undisclosed location on beautiful Vancouver Island. There she is. Thanks for joining us, Alise.
Hello.
Oh.
So happy to be here. Best part of my day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just talk about why we're here.
Is
It's
my
not
connection
Pipeline Day.
terrible?
Yeah, I don't have time for many shows, but we're doing a little special one today. Why don't I leave it? Just put it to you to introduce why we're here. Hello. Yeah.
Well, we're here today because a not so well known until quite recently country music singer from California wanted to come into Canada and play several venues from West Coast to East Coast, East Coast to West Coast. And our government agencies, representatives of our government, elected officials, City Hall, every level of government tried to block him from playing his music in this country. And the argument that they gave was that it was not aligned with their government, whether it was the federal, provincial, or municipal, aligned with their values, not aligned with our public spaces values. I wasn't aware that our public spaces have values, but and so it ironically has turned into this very important discussion around the charter. And the gentleman's name is Feucht. As you know, your publication today printed one of my opinion pieces about why it's amazingly ironic that a country music singer from California schooled our government, our politicians, in what the Constitution really, or what the Charter really means in Canada. And so we're here today to talk about those who have tried to censor him and believe the Charter is handed like a permission slip instead of it actually being everybody's right to say what they want to say, do what they want to do, write what they want to write, until it edges hate speech and willful promotion of political propaganda, which this gentleman isn't even close. So that's why we're here today. And I will then bring in the other part of why we set this up today. If you want, I don't know, Derek, you want to talk about it, but I had been reading a former journalist Twitter, I guess X. Her name is Rachel Gilmore. She is a former pundit and now runs, I don't know what it is, her own channel. And she was saying some of the most egregious things, which I believe to be her attempt to spread misinformation at best, disinformation at worst, and what the Charter really means. And it was through the lens of Sean Feucht coming into Canada. And it absolutely infuriated me, Derek. I couldn't believe a person that constantly, a woman that constantly thinks about her education, her background in journalism, could get the Charter so wrong, and then also manipulate it and twist it so that it fit her political persuasion. And this is something I've been seeing in Canada, or happen in Canada, for a long time now. We're not just on a slippery slope, the whole edge has given out. And so I challenged her to a debate. I said, if you feel that strongly about your position and you can back your tweets or back your posts, then I'd like you to join me in a debate. And that's when Western Standard and yourself, Derek, or you entered the conversation, said we'd be very happy to host it. And so that's why I'm here today, and unfortunately we're here today.
Okay, so yeah, we I kind of entered, Derek enters the conversation where it kind of ended, I guess. I said, Western Standard would be happy to host the debate. Now I can understand why, kind of a hard left personality might be leery, but I've hosted debates before. I hosted a UCP leadership debate where I privately definitely had favorites, and some I like a lot more than others. But I think I've been a pretty fair moderator and host on these kinds of things. Even when, every moderator has always got a favorite. I don't care if you're debating your favorite color. You've got your own favorite color. So we promised, you know, to use her words, a safe space to, you know, to debate, you know, have this out. You know, she thinks it's fine to for the government to just ban a musical act simply because it's Christian and conservative. All right, well, I mean, you should probably be willing to debate. I don't think I've ever actually seen her. I mean, somewhere in her life, I'm sure she's actually had a public debate where she's actually had to defend and be challenged and defend her ideas. But I've never seen it myself. It's always just a couple of mean girl tweets. And, you know,
I don't think so, Derek.
Yeah, I've never seen it. So what we did is we invited her to the debate. She kind of snarkily declined. Is her right? Fine. But we said, well, we're going to do it anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to schedule it for 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, where you are. And we sent her a private invitation, and we sent her a link. Said, like, if you'd like to join us, here's the link. You can join us at any time. We're going to be there at 2 p.m. So I'm not expecting her to show up at this point, but hypothetically, Rachel Gilmore might pop into the stream. And I got production over here. John, we did, I think I was copied on that. Yeah, we sent her the link, right?
Yes.
All right, Rachel Gilmore's got the link to the back end here where she can enter the stream at any time. Right now, I don't have to be a neutral moderator, so we can both just shit talk and say whatever we want really right now. But if at some point she decides to enter the chat, join the debate, you know, I promise to be as best as I humanly can, neutral and fair moderator, and let the two of you at it. I mean, that's good TV. That'd be good TV to see the two of you go head to head on this issue. I doubtful we will, but instead we're just until or if such a time is she were to join us, we're just gonna. I think we're gonna have a discussion about the dangerously authoritarian trend in this country and across the Western world more broadly. But you know, we'll talk about Canada more specifically. To just censor those we disagree with. And also, but the need for those of us on what is normally the receiving end on the right to be aware of when we're trying to do it. So, you know, we've got this Feucht Act, as I said on the pipeline yesterday. I'd never heard of them. Never heard of them before this. I doubt most, like if I have not heard of them, they're probably not well known at all among the broader Canadian public who don't pay as much attention to politics in the news. But now everybody has heard of these guys. Said on the pipeline again, I'm not a big fan of Christian rock. I find it a little too on the nose for the most part. I haven't liked a Christian rock act since Creed. But it doesn't matter if it's good or not, or if you like it or not. We traditionally in this country have not been in the business of banning musical acts that we disagree with. So maybe let's talk. Maybe one, it's a UK, I think, example, where we're going to flip it around on its head, where we have to be on the defensive. So there was a concert recently in the UK, maybe it was Glasgow, and there were two acts there that people on our side of the fence would find extremely offensive and distasteful, putting it mildly. I can't remember. Do you remember the names of these guys? Do you remember the names of these guys, Alise? There's a little delay, I think. So
it's Kneecap. They're an Irish band, and they were playing at a BBC, or they were playing at a London music festival, and actually it was I can't remember what it was in celebration of. It was some sort of national. I believe it was a national holiday there, and BBC was live streaming it. And during and they were obviously not only anti-Israel, but I believe anti-Semitic, and that is my opinion. And they came right out and started chanting "Death to the IDF, death to Israel." And then, but the BBC was live-streaming it, so BBC similar to the CBC, taxpayer funded, and they didn't cut away. And people, you could tell people, the presenters, other people were horrified. And that has led to the ban from shows across the EU, being banned in the United States. And I will say that I have written and posted several times to our government. And so I find it ironic that they've come out and immediately tried to ban Sean Feucht. Meanwhile, this anti-Semitic, hateful group who has nothing pleasant to say whatsoever, and I would say quite lyrical, happily.
Oh, okay. So we've lost Alise there. She's had a pretty rough internet connection. She's going to be back in, but all right. Yeah. So Alise, we've had troubles with your connection. I don't know. I'll say something. Maybe if you could try to strengthen your signal, if that's possible. You know, what Kneecap, this band, was saying at a concert in Glasgow. I thought it was hateful. I thought it's obviously anti-Israel, chanting death. Oh, I can hear myself now. Okay, there we go. Chanting death to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. I think they probably were anti-Semitic, but I don't think that language in itself is technically. It's fine to very much dislike a state or a government, even to hate a state or a government. I'm not sure I use the word hate, but I have a pretty strong dislike for some regimes, or I'm not sure about states themselves, but certainly some regimes around the world. I hate the People's Republic. If I chanted death to the People's Liberation Army, I don't think that necessarily means I mean death to all Chinese people. Now, did these guys mean death to all Jewish people? Yeah, maybe they did. But I want to be cautious about conflating the difference between dislike or even hate of Israel with hate of Jewish people. Although there's a pretty big overlap. Fair. But there were some calls on the right and from Jewish groups to ban these musical acts and to censor these musical acts, and I thought that was the wrong way to go about it. If you're the concert organizer, you have a right to not have them, and I think they probably shouldn't have had them. But I would have had a bigger problem, with governments intervening to pull these guys off the air or stop them from playing their concert. I would have had a bigger problem with that than actually the act of these guys performing. However, probably and arguably hateful their content was. And what we call hate, I think what one of the big problems is here is what actually is hate. We used to draw the line at hate as actively inciting violence or harm against an identifiable group. If you said, kill all the Jews, okay, that's hateful. If we said, kill all the Muslims, kill all the Christians. Well, traditionally Christians have not been allowed to be included because it's seen as a majority privileged group if you buy into that stuff. But it was pretty clear that was hate. But now, then it went to, you could say, I'm not a big fan of XY group. And then that got banned. And I think you should be allowed to not be a fan and say you're not a fan of a group. And maybe that is an odious opinion, but guess what? It's an opinion, and that should be defensible in a free society. And if it's a bad opinion, we should let the marketplace of ideas, hopefully the good ideas win through. They don't always. But now it's not even just, I'm not a fan of that group. It's, I have something negative to say about an individual who even belongs to a group. And so you get the types like Rachel Gilmore, the federal government, Parks Canada, municipalities, provincial governments, where that's not the line of hate anymore. It's, you've said something that I find disagreeable, that does not agree with my ideology at all, and then that's hate, and we can cancel it. I think the problem is we have moved the line on what is hate so far, and I think I've gotten to the point where we cannot trust anyone to draw the line on what is legally defined hate, and perhaps we have to drop the idea of hate speech laws altogether because the state simply can't be trusted to draw the line in a responsible place anymore.
Well, you said a couple of things, Derek, and I hope you can hear me because my headset's now not working because I flipped to my phone.
I hear you now.
Okay, great. So let's just remember that unpopular or distasteful or contrarian ideas and opinions don't immediately mean hate. This is where people are confused. If you are offended, turn the TV off, disassociate from X, do whatever you have to do. But you are not to ask the government to intervene on something that doesn't meet the standard of hate speech or willful promotion of hate, which is the propaganda side. And to give you an example of that, that would be burning flags, inciting violence, things like chanting death to Canada, or standing outside of a Jewish nursery school or nursing home yelling death to Jews. That is hate speech. And I think the reason why people like myself are so irritated, and I do agree with you, I may have to put up with Kneecap coming to Vancouver, but it makes my blood boil. And I think it makes my blood boil and others' blood boil as well, because of the huge disparity in what this government is willing to accept and almost agree to and sign off. You look at what's happened in Toronto on Bathurst, you look at downtown Toronto. Last weekend, Scotiabank was covered in red paint, and they were screaming, death to Canada, death to Jews. I think a lot of us are wondering, okay, so how is Sean banned? He's not burning flags. He's not inciting hate. He's a Christian musician that is singing in a peaceful worship type festival. That's exactly what's going on. I, as you know, I don't know his music. I don't think it's my thing either, but that's not the point of all of this. And I think the points you're making, Derek, about Kneecap are absolutely true, but I think my tolerance and many of the people I speak to and my followers all agree that when we're watching what's been happening in places, especially like Toronto, the tolerance for anybody, for any hate is zero.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because there is a huge gap between what the government says, what the government does, and what our criminal code says, and what our police officers do. And I have an intolerance for the tolerance of that type of hate. I also think that certain people like Rachel Gilmore really believe freedom of expression is a progressive perk, that it's not a constitutional right for all of us to have. And I think that is something that's becoming increasingly obvious. That it's almost like she believes, or her ilk believe, that there's almost a political purity test to see if you pass so that you can have the privilege of having your rights around freedom of expression and speech. And I think that's where people have really lost their minds on this issue. And when I say lost their minds, I mean they're just extremely angry and outraged. And I think the pendulum has swung. Governments are not going to get away with censoring for no good reason. And our public spaces do not supersede, or the government does not supersede, the charter.
So, I was talking about hate laws, and you're talking about hate laws, but the censorship of Feucht here is not been done under the guise of hate laws. There's a lot of hate rhetoric around it. There's, the justifications around it in many cases. Oh, Rachel's joined us. Look. Don't have to, the big picture. Oh, there we go. Come on, we don't need that much. Too much.
I was
Rachel.
Excited.
Too much, Rachel. Maybe
That's a lot of Rachel.
Maybe her connection's about as good as yours. But the censorship of Feucht here hasn't been done through the criminal code with hate speech laws. It hasn't been done by the Human Rights Commission, kind of the traditional venues of the state censoring in Canada. It's been done largely, for the most part, by pulling permits. The permits that were all approved, as far as I'm aware, before they landed in this country. There was Parks Canada ones, some federal land, provincial land, places under municipal jurisdiction, and Parks Canada put out this mealy-mouthed statement. They didn't say this is hate and we're shutting it down and prosecuting it. They put out a statement saying, well, we can't guarantee the safety and security of the place. Like, bullshit. Okay. But then they had this mealy-mouthed part attached to it that says, it's not compatible with Parks Canada values. You're talking about this, and diversity. The only diversity Parks Canada should care about is biodiversity. But if you're going to care about diversity, no one ever cares about diversity of thought, diversity of opinions, diversity of perspectives. If we're talking about diversity of religion, it's certainly never Christianity. That never seems to fit into the mix. But they were pulling permits. Some municipalities, like I think Quebec City and Montreal, the mayors just said this is hateful and blah 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 blah, and not compatible and not welcome in our city, which is funny because Quebec is probably has the most discriminatory laws in North America on the books.
Yeah.
And I don't see much resistance from the mayors of Montreal and Quebec City towards extremely discriminatory legislation against Muslims or against Anglophones in Quebec. They're quite happy with that kind of discrimination, and fine, whatever. It's Quebec's going to Quebec, and I've stopped caring. It's their own place, but they're quite happy with it on their own terms. And so, but they did it under the guise of permits. So then, they found a way around it, and fine, we won't do it at a regular concert venue. We're gonna have a concert inside of a church. They didn't even bring in. This is in Montreal, and they didn't even bring in additional sound equipment. I've seen it reported, at least. They just used the stuff the church already had. So there was it was just like pretty much a regular night. Churches do operate outside of strictly on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. And now they're fined by the city of Montreal. I would imagine if there's even a half competent judge and half fair judge, that's going to get defeated in court. I think the Canadian Constitution Foundation is fighting on that one. But these guys are not fighting under the strict hate speech laws anymore. They're just using permits and whatnot to disrupt it. I don't know if there's any defense to that. I mean, we get one of the problems with democracy is you get the government you deserve, and people elect people. Presumably the politicians in these places think it's going to make them more popular to do this. And I'm not sure when they're fighting through the permitting phase that there really is any kind of defense against this when you have an electorate that's willing to reward politicians for this kind of behavior.
Well, I think a great example of where this has gone completely off the rails. So Abbotsford, BC had a scheduled show, or Sean had a scheduled show there. Abbotsford pulled the permit, which is shocking because you might know this, Derek. Abbotsford has one of the largest Christian communities in all of British Columbia.
I was surprised to see Abbotsford do something so explicitly anti-Christian.
Yes, and their reasoning for it, and this is something that I think that we need to take a look at, and it really falls under the file of intimidation. But and I want to say that the BC Conservative MLA out there has written a letter, made a statement. I have reposted that, and I absolutely 100% agree with her. And unfortunately, her name is slipping my mind, and I apologize. But they were saying that they weren't pulling it because they disagreed with Sean and his music, and they didn't feel that there was any evidence of hate, contrary to what the Premier was talking, or Premier Eby was remarking on yesterday, that he said that it was unacceptable values. Well, we can get into Sean's lyrics in a second, because there is no hate or unacceptable values in his music. But the problem Abbotsford has is that they're responding to safety concerns. They cannot assure the safety of Sean or those in attendance. And I think when, what we saw was a strong intimidation factor, threats of violence there for concert goers or festival goers. Smoke bombs were released. That's really dangerous. There were lots of young people in that crowd. So now we're talking about the intimidation as well. And when low information voters, and I don't mean that to be derogatory, even though it sounds that way, but Canadians are busy trying to pay their bills. They're not necessarily paying attention, and they trust. I think a lot of people still trust what their government is saying. So if the government is going out there saying, we don't want this guy playing, he's a dangerous guy, which is what some Liberal MPs, this is how this all kicked off, which some Liberal MPs were calling him dangerous and hateful. If I heard that, and I wasn't in this business, and I wasn't actively pursuing information, I would think, yeah, then of course the government wouldn't make a statement like that unless it's true. Mm-hmm. So it's verbal intimidation. It's asking you to just avoid him. He's a bad guy because he has these values. And then now the outcome of that is you've almost endorsed people to hate him. And you've endorsed what will become acceptable violence, because when you shrink away and pull the permit, you're giving over to that very small group of people who seem to be the loudest in the country right now. To take it's the illegal behavior that we see in other cities as well that have blocked roads and stopped ambulances going through. We are acquiescing to the illegal and sometimes violent behavior.
Yeah. Sorry.
And that's a break in the charter.
Yeah. Sorry, your stream is getting a little rough again. It was good for a bit, but it's getting a little rough again. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think, I'm not sure there's a good way to defend this anymore. I mean, this mostly started from the CBC. The CBC did some hatchet job on Feucht here, and it just said he's anti-LGBTQ plus 2SI. Maybe I got the full alphabet acronym right. I don't know. They said he's a Christian nationalist. Well, what does that mean? Does he mean, he believes that America was founded as a Christian country? Because it was. I mean, it was a secular state, but it was populated by Christian people.
Like us. Like Canada.
Yeah, just like Canada. But, anti-LGBTQ, 2SI, plus XYZ. What does that mean? They didn't elaborate. I mean, maybe he said something nasty there, but I mean that could mean something as simple as saying I don't like drag queens dancing in front of little children, and the CBC would consider that to be hateful and anti alphabet stuff. I mean, maybe he said something worse than that. I haven't seen it. Maybe he's got songs about it. I haven't heard it. Perhaps, but they didn't provide any examples of this stuff. They just said he is anti this, he is this phobe, he is this that ism. They didn't actually demonstrate any of it.
Well, they took on the CBC took on the persona of lobbyist. That article was not written with journalistic integrity, in my belief. It was written with a political agenda meant to influence government wholeheartedly and full-throatedly to block him from coming in. And I would love to do a deeper dive on who the person was that wrote that piece, and how somehow Parks Canada got involved in this. I will tell you, and I have spent a lot of time reviewing Sean's music. The issue is not Sean's music. If you listen to it, it's very what you would expect. I mean, Derek, if you and I pranced off to one of his shows, to one of these festivals, we would see a lot of swaying and hand holding and love, and he's very charismatic. It's what he has said on his social media. And he has said, as a Christian, I do not want a drag queen reading to my children at the public library. And I'm paraphrasing here. He hasn't used hateful language. I get what I would say is hateful language in the terms of, inciting violence or anything. He simply has given his opinion. And by the way, if he was Canadian, he is allowed to do that. He is allowed to say controversial and statements. He's allowed to give that opinion. He can. People aren't going to like it, but it doesn't go into hate speech or the willful promotion of hate propaganda or whatever it is. And that's the other thing. People are using criminal code all the time in this conversation. So it's what he's been saying, and he has what we would expect, Derek, very traditional Christian values. There's a law in there I don't support, but he has the right to say it. I feel that this demonstrates the power that the CBC has in the ability to influence, and it also demonstrates the CBC's role in taking a very activist type role. I'm not interested in the CBC becoming an activist journalist outlet. I'm not willing to pay for that.
Well, too late. It has been for a very long time, I think. Okay, well, let's steer this back towards Gilmore. I mean, she doesn't deserve the attention she gets, but she's kind of, she's become kind of a symbol of. She's fun to pick on because she's an idiot, and she comes across so ditzy, and I she's actually kind of leaning into it, I guess. The bubble pop thing, maybe that would have been cute if you're like 20 years old in university or something, and you have lots of likes, and like you do the kind of the Valley Girl thing. Maybe you'd play then, but you're also trying to pass yourself off as a serious journalist. Now, I don't think she's held a journalism job for more than a week, and I don't know how long. It's been a long time, I think. But she wants to try to pass herself off as a credible professional journalist. But then both her content and the presentation of that content is so juvenile. Like the content is like first year university breakout seminar, like just repeating like you're just repeating kind of a really ditzy version of what your professor told you, kind of regurgitating that. So I know she gets more attention than she deserves. She doesn't have a very big audience. She hasn't held a job in a credible media organization in an extremely long time now, I think, at least by the span of her own career. I think she's probably been unemployed longer than she's been employed as a journalist. But she's kind of fun for us to kind of keep going back to, because she's just so stupid, and she's easy to pick on. So I do worry sometimes about picking on these folks that maybe we're being unfair towards kind of a whole broad side of the spectrum, because we've got idiots on our side too, and I hate it when they pick on our well, they can pick on our idiots, and it's all fair game. So I don't want to smear everyone on one side is like that. There are liberals, a very small number, but there are still some traditional liberals who might hate the sound of something, but will defend to the death your right to say it. Mostly in the States, for prominent ones, you got guys like Bill Maher. He's a liberal. Yeah. Increasingly, he actually sounds pretty middle of the road, actually, but he's traditionally was considered a pretty hard liberal for a long time. But you've got him. Who else? Maybe Jon Stewart-ish, a little bit. But for the most part, the left has lost all sense of humor. They've lost any sense of that free speech is for anyone except for your own mealy-mouthed, politically correct speech. And the left has lost this. But that's an old story. They lost it a long time ago. So maybe we don't want to retread that too much. But maybe we go back to the dangers on our side, because you can't police the other side's commitment to free speech, but you could police your own side's commitment to free speech. Is there anywhere you see, maybe on our side of the aisle, where maybe we're a little bit weak on this, and we need to be a bit tougher and on guard against ourselves trying to censor people on the other side?
Well, I think we begin actually with our Rachel Gilmores. There's many of them, and I call them the YouTube tech bros and Barbies, right? During this election, we seem to grow an amazing amount of voices, which I was so happy about, especially the 18 to 48 or whatever that demographic is, them coming out, speaking, wanting to talk policy. I love all of that. But what also emerged was a cottage industry, and that's an old-fashioned term, but the cottage industry on YouTube of conservatives that were proclaiming to be policy experts, constitutional experts, and they were, they all kind of look like tech bros, and the girls look like, kind of Barbie, and they are inciting anger and inflaming anger in a way that I haven't seen. And I find it, I've been really ticked off, Derek. I've seen some of this stuff, and then they're infighting with each other. They don't know policy. They've incited convoy number 3 or whatever over some random issue that really wasn't a constitutional matter. It was so stupid, I can't even remember what it was now. But here's the problem. Rachel Gilmore, her type on the left, the people I've just identified, this whole industry on YouTube, where, some of these commentators who we've never seen, as a staffer, a journalist, an opinion writer, a pundit, suddenly have emerged as these experts, and people are listening to them. Our people are listening to them. But for both sides, what really concerns me is how much the need to monetize every word they're saying is influencing what they're saying. And I think we've just traveled down a really dangerous road. You know, I'm not being paid to sit here today, and I'm very happy about that. I'm here to talk about the freedoms that are eroding in our country. I'm here to speak on the charter, something that I wouldn't say I'm an expert in, but I have a fulsome understanding of. I understand how legislation is made. I understand how it's passed. I understand how our parliamentary system works. Much like you, Derek, you and I both come from very similar backgrounds. We have experience and background in that. And I would never take money or promote myself to monetize untruths. And that's a real concern. And I'm not suggesting Gilmore is in that financial relationship, but we all know there are many others that are in that business, and they're using TikTok, they're using YouTube, and they're sort of drumming up these fake conspiracies as well. And that, whether it's coming from the side that Rachel's on or our side, that weakens our country. It's intended to break our country. And no matter what, I still believe in this country. I think it's got more than a fighting chance, but it's up to all of us to start contradicting some of that, pushing back on it. I'm an equal opportunist. I'll take my own out as quickly as I'll take Rachel Gilmore's statements out.
Well, where I wanted to go, though, was not just like our equivalents of Rachel Gilmore, who were kind of idiotic TikTokers on the right side of the spectrum. I want to talk about, you know, where are our blind spots for free speech on the right side? You know, like the left. Yeah. I think it's pretty fair comment to say the left is clearly much more censorious than the right, but I do see some worrying signs on the right where the right's trying to silence views on the left or from other groups that it disagrees with. I have a harder time coming up with ready examples because there are a lot less, but I think we need to be on guard for that. That's why I kind of started us off with the Kneecap example. I think I think around the Israel-Palestine issue, I think there's an instinct from some on the right to want to censor, those with a pretty hard anti-Israel view. And I think we need to be on guard for that. Now, sometimes it does go into outright hate, and that's different. But I know, as I said earlier, I don't really have faith in the state to actually fairly draw the line on what is hated or not anymore, because they just push it one way or another depending on who the group is that they favor. So I kind of lean towards maybe we just don't have the government draw the line anymore because it's so unable to be trusted. So I see it a bit on the Israel-Palestine issue as a reflex on the right that tries to censor the other side. Is there, and you could talk about that if you like, but also if, is there any other areas or examples where maybe we need to be on guard against the right trying to censor the left or other groups where we're in disagreement with?
I'm going to be fully self-aware. I have struggled anytime I see the anti-Israel thing. There have been times where I've lost my mind on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And I've had to self-reflect. I've had to pull myself off of it and go, I can't look at it anymore. I'm outraged a lot of the time. And then that question that you're asking is something I've asked myself as I've not only was on the show with you yesterday and we're here today, and I've written the op-ed for the Western Standard. That caused me to reflect on where I have started to control speech. And I had to look at my own root cause. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I bet you there are people watching right now that either follow me or follow you or both of us that could probably say the same thing about themselves, is that the moment that you see the other side and you're seeing some of this most horrible imagery. I'm going to use Bathurst as the example. The effigies, the absolute hate speech. I'm shocked that this is my country. So when I see that, it ignites me. And being a human being, I want to shut them up. And I'm not taking the time to think, okay, how far deep into hate speech is this, or to the criminal code, I should say, am I stopping their charter rights? And it hasn't really been until the Sean issue showed up that I've had to really self-reflect. So I want to start with me, because I really feel they're speaking to me there, Derek, is watch ourselves, right? And I would say Israel is the top issue. I have a hard time finding any other example on the right, and I would say, I mean, everything from center to more hardliner right. I have a hard time finding another example where I've seen any conservative shut down free speech. But Israel is definitely a Achilles heel. It's the soft underbelly. And I think that anger and that willingness to shut someone else's charter rights down is because we feel like ours have been shut down.
Yeah. As you're talking, I was thinking, maybe I have another example, imperfect, because I'll try not to be a hypocrite here. I want to try to be honest with myself, our viewers, and you. And it's quite adjacent to what just happened with Feucht in Montreal, because we've all seen the videos of these public Islamic prayers in the streets of Montreal. And I'm conflicted on that one. It could go either way. I'm not a Muslim. I have no sympathy with it. But I do believe in the right to public prayer, even for a faith I don't share, or in some cases have very strong disagreements with, beyond just a theological level. I'm talking on a cultural level. Now, Islamic prayer, if it's in a park, it's in an area where you would have a concert or something, and they want to do that, I'll be honest with myself. I don't like it. But they're here. It's their right to do it. So, okay. And I think I need to rein myself in from, my own instincts to be like, no, that doesn't belong here. It's alien to us, and we should stop it. And so we have to kind of rein that in on ourselves. Now, the public prayer, where they're doing it in the middle of the street, blocking traffic with no permit, and no fines were levied for not having a permit. And Feucht does it inside of a church, private property, no disruption to anyone except for the opponents of them going, and they get the fine. But yeah, if you do, these Islamic prayers in the middle of the street, blocking traffic, no permit, it's not like a designated parade or something, or protest. Okay. But, but then we have to be prepared to apply that to ourselves. But we apply that to Christians or mainstream Canadian society, Quebec society, etc. Although that's not really Christians generally don't shut down an intersection and start kneeling and whatnot. It's not our bag. But, we have to be careful to apply carefully across the board. But I would see that as a potential soft underbelly as well, where we need to be on guard against being censorious ourselves actually within Quebec, they've passed laws that are kind of on the surface neutral against, say, wearing of religious imagery, but we know what it's about. Like, come on, wink, wink, guys. We know what it's about. And that's kind of the Quebec nationalist thing, which is nationalism's traditionally a phenomenon on the right, but that's not really necessarily the case in Quebec. It's more mixed and maybe even dominantly on the left. But yeah, I would see that maybe as another area where we need to be self-reflective, and
I agree.
is a place to stop things like, holding a prayer of that kind outside of a church, outside of a Catholic church, blocking the street. I think that's meant as a sort of political, religious, or cultural intimidation, and saying, this is our place. We're the dominant active religion here now. Maybe not in numbers, but in terms of active participants. Islam is possibly more powerful in Montreal now than Catholicism, at least as an active cultural and religious force. I think they were sending a message there. But so anyway, I'm not sure where.
I think it's intimidation.
But an intimidation, again, where are we drawing the line? So not all intimidation should be illegal. Overt intimidation should be.
Well, I think honestly, you're right. Okay, so public prayer, yes, your charter right. But what I'd like to invite all of us maybe to do is, why don't we all try and block a very popular intersection with our Christian prayers or our Jewish prayers? I invite all faiths to maybe join us and see how very quickly, the VPD or Toronto Police or Montreal Police would remove us, or even Calgary Police, since Calgary wasn't willing to stand up for Sean either, contrary to what people may understand. I think we do get caught. This is a blind spot for people like myself, and I'll throw myself out there to the wolves. When I'm looking at it, I know it's an attempt for social engineering. I know it's intent to influence and to there is, and you can't deny this, there is a movement to change our society to be to reflect more Islamic values. I'm happy to debate that as well and to discuss that. But when you watch it, your immediate response is you understand what it is and you forget about the charter. And I think you're bringing up really great points, Derek, because you're making me self-reflect. You're making me think about this as well. I think I don't think the right has really been caught on its back foot in regards to free speech or freedom of expression, which, by the way, free speech is hidden in there and under freedom of expression. But you are bringing that up, and that's something that we need to be really aware of, because the people that we were just talking about, people that have styled themselves as influencers on the right, they themselves, I think that is the Achilles. I think that's actually where that problem around freedom of expression that you're talking about, where we're not properly ensuring that we understand charter rights apply there, that is where it's growing the most common. And, I think today you've reminded me to catch myself as well, but I was very quick to point it out with everybody else, right? So, and that's normally how it goes. But I think it also, and I will say this, it's easy for conservatives, whether they're big C or small c conservatives, fiscal conservatives, social conservatives, or all types of conservatives, to, when they see these moments happening, whether it's Bathurst or it's downtown Toronto, these massive prayers, it's hard for them not to see that even, a couple of years ago, or even maybe now, they would be removed from blocking that intersection. They wouldn't be allowed to walk around with, effigies or yelling hate, death to any other religious group. And it's got conservatives twisted up. Like I said, no matter whether you're conservative fiscal, social conservative, whatever, what we all seem to share is this libertarian streak and also this belief in our fundamental freedoms and liberties. And we understand that there's two tiers of justice and two tiers of charter that's happening in this country, Derek. And I think that's the better question to ask, because I think conservatives feel stifled. I think they feel they can't say anything about it without being labeled a racist or intolerant. And that has enabled people that would normally be the first fighters around charter rights to shrink back from that and say, well, but we can't get away with it, and they can.
So maybe I'm going to take a different track now about where this might go. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I feel like our side is fighting with a hand tied between our back. And I don't know how long that lasts. And, the opponents of freedom of expression never stop to think that perhaps the laws we've passed today or the intimidation tactics we use today to silence our opponents could ever be used against us. And you see that with totalitarian right-wing regimes, totalitarian left-wing regimes, or even ostensibly democratic societies like ours, when you've got the center-left in power, the center-right. No one ever stops to think, could this be used against us? And it's not just free speech. It might be accountability laws. The government might change the law to make the government less accountable, and everyone thinks, that's great. This is going to be advantageous to us politically. But chances are you're not going to rule forever. No regime lasts for all time, except in Alberta. But, you never stop to think the other guys are eventually going to be in power. And they might use these laws or these tactics against us. But on freedom of expression, for a very long time now, as long as I've been alive, and I think longer, it has been the left that has been the more censorious kind. And it's become more and more extreme. And it means that we can win some battles, but aggregate, we're on the losing side because we don't use the same tools, the same tactics. Does this inevitably lead us to a place where we're not defending to the death your right to say something I disagree with, because you won't defend to the death my right to say something that you disagree with? If this is a one-sided, for freedom of expression to work, it has to be a grand bargain, collectively made as a society, as a body politic, as a state, that this applies to everyone. But when it doesn't apply to everyone, eventually, if this is a one-sided bargain, it stops being a bargain, and it will collapse. And so I foresee at some point, our side is going to stop being the side tolerant of freedom of expression, and it's just we're going to untie that hand. And
what do you think the tipping point was for when conservatives, and I'm part of this, I have to admit, I've committed a few offenses along the way too when it came to Israel, but what do you think the tipping point was? Because I think it was it Bill C-63, which was the if you're thinking of a bad thought, we'll know about it and we'll come and arrest you legislation. For me, I think that was a tipping point in our conservative conversations.
Well, I mean, that was no. I think that was the conservative side, broadly speaking. I think was still in the no. We're defending free speech. What I'm talking about is at what point does the right side stop being this benevolent defender of free speech, because we see it only applying to us tolerating them, but them not tolerating us. And if that bargain only goes one way, eventually our side is going to say, well, why should we be noble defenders of your rights when you will not be noble defenders of our rights? And so in the long term, I can see it as entirely plausible that our side stops and we start applying censorship and suppression to the other side, because we're going to be in a perpetually losing battle if we're the only if in a battle only one side observes the Geneva Convention, and and you're losing the war and you're observing the Geneva Convention, you're going to stop following the Geneva Convention. You're going to start shooting prisoners. So that's kind of where I see things potentially going on our side.
The problem is I do not see how we stop. And I used to say it was slippery slope, and I've said it before. The cliff is now like given away, right? It's now just a torrent of a debris coming down in regards to freedoms and rights, because the government, whether I like some of the bills or not, for example, moving big projects in this country with no consultation is exactly like Trudeau moving forward with marine mapping and controlling and I would say appropriating British Columbia's resources without consultation, which I was opposed to, but suddenly I'm very happy we're going to move big projects forward under pretty much the same legislation I opposed. I don't want to go too far in the weeds in that, but I think that's a really good example as well. But I do think that when government is leading us to a two-tier charter, two-tier constitution, two tiers of judiciary, we have activist judges, this will set a conservative's hair on fire. And if the conservative no longer feels that the state is being truthful and is operating within the guardrails of the charter and for example, the criminal code, and I know I've been there myself, the conservative will do exactly what you're doing. They will stop being the defenders of free speech when it doesn't matter or relate to issues that are important to them. And I agree, but it's not a slippery slope. We're already there. I see it all the time. I've admitted I've had to catch myself. But this is when government steps out of its responsibilities, as this country has experienced from all levels of government for a decade. What did they goddamn expect, Derek? They have removed themselves from the very things that that we require them to do, which is to lead us to do the very thing that you're talking about, which is no matter whose rights it is, we will defend it. And it's only in recent modern times that liberals have contorted themselves into positions not to be in line with or find excuses as to why they're not in line with the charter, right? And we have a whole generation that has been privy to this, what I call calamity. It's an exercise of disaster, and it is decaying this country, which is the whole premise as to why I was infuriated with Rachel Gilmore. And so I think you're asking great questions, but I'm very concerned about what I see in the future, and I mean the very near future, because if we continue down this road where only certain groups have certain rights or certain avenues on the judiciary or their charter rights are the only ones that are protected, we're going to be in a whole world of hurt. And I think we're very close to that doorstep.
Perhaps what we need, kind of going along with my Geneva Convention analogy.
It's a good one.
Maybe we need to shoot a few hostages. Like, I would prefer us to return to the grand bargain, where we'll defend your right to free speech, but you have to defend mine. You don't have to agree with me. You can argue with me and whatever, but we're going to have to agree on the basic ground rules here. But, in my analogy, there's a war, and let's say it's a rough stalemate. No one's really winning. One day one's up, one day the other's up. But only one side's signed the Geneva Convention here. The way to get the other guy to sign the Geneva Convention in that case might be like, okay, if you don't sign it, we're gonna shoot a couple of your guys. We're gonna play by your rules on a small scale for a brief period of time, just to let you know how unpleasant it is. So maybe Kneecap wants to come to Alberta, and we very publicly ban it. And I think that would be wrong. That is wrong. That is a bad thing to do. But maybe we need to do something like that.
But it's going to feel so good, Derek. It's going to be like birthdays and Christmases rolled into one.
Actually, I wouldn't even feel good about it. Like, I know. I wouldn't feel,
I would.
Although, yeah, maybe you will. A bunch of people, maybe I could find something I'd feel good about. Like, let's just ban a David Suzuki speech. Like, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But let's ban Rachel Gilmore. That's a good example. Okay. Let's ban Rachel Gilmore from coming to Alberta.
Like Rachel Gilmore poetry reading or whatever she gets up to.
Yeah, Rachel Gilmore's slam poetry.
Yeah.
We should not do that. But maybe we need to just shoot a couple of these prisoners to make the point. Be like, okay, guys, we can do it too.
Yeah.
Let's stop and take a breath and kind of come back to agreement on what the ground rules are in this game. And this is an important fight. We both sides believe this is existential nearly at this point. But here's our ground rules, and if you don't follow them, we're not going to follow them. So we're going to ban a Rachel Gilmore slam poetry reading and David Suzuki whale call session or something.
The best equivalent, honestly, Derek, is banning that massive Islamic prayer session. Because if you're going to ban Sean and his religious music, this is an equivalent. Yeah. And so I'm going to pull all those Islamic worshipers off the street, and we might even put you in jail for some of the city bylaws that you've broken.
On mischief charges for 7 years.
Throw in, if an ambulance can't get through, well, then we're in a whole other level, and let's try it that way, because I will tell you, I don't think they'll jump, they'll support Kneecap, because even the most crazy of the left I don't want to be seen as supporting that, but we could definitely, the equivalent would be the Islamic massive prayer thing that goes on, which, by the way, no other faiths are invited to. And this is the other thing. The Muslim leadership, across this country are silent and silent and silent, and I would. There's very little reach out to other faiths when terrible things happen or committed by Muslims or from the Islamic community, and I think that some of I would say that there isn't a level of interfaith connectivity there that I would like to see. So I'd like to scoop up the Islamic prayer. I can do that. We can do that. That I think is a really good equivalent to what we've been dealing with.
There's our hostage. And then we should try to go back to not doing that. But this might be it. I think we've got to make a point that we can both play dirty, and we should both go back to trying to be a little more gentlemanly. We can both follow the rules.
I think we make a lot of excuses. I think conservatives apologize way too much. I think we're always the first one to sort of put, well, I maybe less today than during the Harper years, but I remember being a very active regular pundit on CBC, and I was very careful in my tweets at that time. I post what I was saying. I tried to sort of give a lot of runway and legal and legislative context as to why I believed in something. But I learned very quickly that any of my good graces was completely lost on these people. These people are lunatics half the time. And I think what I started to hear, not just from average working Canadians that are friends of mine, but certain politicians. And it was, do you feel this is Canada anymore? Do you feel very Canadian anymore? Do you feel like our rights are being honored? And it was in whispered tones, hushed tones in private circles. But that now has gone viral. It's gone public. People have just sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater and they go, I don't. You need to establish something for the goose, good for the gator, and all the other lovely things that you said. But yes, it would be a wonderful, wonderful present to me if we could do something like that.
Okay. Well,
I get a lot of
maybe the left should take this as the warning. You've got to comply quickly, or we're going to start shooting our hostages. Metaphorically, everyone metaphorically. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
What I'd like to see is, if I could just say this, I know there's a lot of people that are tuning in, and I just want to give a shout out to somebody that connected with me and said, I'm not monetizing. And that's the Twitter account or X account at CBC Watcher. Fantastic work this guy does. I love him. Fantastic. But that means there's a lot of people watching. And I would say, just on what Derek and I were last speaking about, I'd love to hear from people on Twitter, whether you agree with Derek and I or not. I'd love to hear if you understand what we're actually talking about and what your own personal experience is, because the more we talk, the more we engage, the more we debate and exercise our charter rights and freedoms, the more we have a chance of pulling ourselves back from the abyss that I think we're teetering on. And I think, Derek, you think we're probably teetering on it too, right?
I'm not even sure we're teetering anymore. I think we're hurling our way down. Yeah, I think we're hurtling downwards at this point.
So do I.
We're going to places I don't like as a society, and I don't think the left is going to like it either. I think we're losing the ability to talk to one another, come to an equilibrium that maybe we all don't particularly like, but we can accept. We're getting to an I think we are very quickly approaching an unacceptable place, and that's not just Canada. I think it's right across the Western civilization that we're going there, and I just think we're headed for a nasty place. And one side's got its both hands untied. If the other side takes it off too, it's going to get nasty. So be warned.
I'll tell you, it's a country worth fighting for, but we are not even close to restoring our values, our freedoms, and our rights. And it's not. I don't want to see any more political gamemanship. I want people to lead first with being Canadian and thinking about what they want for their children. I would recommend you look at what's happened in the UK. They're having to crawl or claw back their country in a way that I had never thought I would ever see in my entire lifetime. And we just have to remember not to let fear cloud our judgment on how we're going to proceed to bring this country back to what it once was. Not that many years ago.
By this country, I assume you just mean Alberta.
Yeah. Well, actually, just some of Western Canada.
West.
Yeah, just West.
We'll include British Columbians.
You want to hear something funny? A Torontonian tweeted at me and said, "Hey, what time's this debate?" And I wrote back 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And he's like, "Well, wait a second. What does MST stand for? Is it cow time or something like that?" And I said, only a Torontonian doesn't need to understand anyone else's time zones because they have the privilege of just being in that EST zone or, whatever it is. And I just thought it was the perfect lead into our call into our time together today, because this is the stuff that drives Western Canadians nuts. So, don't be calling it cow time, you ignorant jerks. So anyway, but, yes, we have so many fights on our hands, Derek, and I just want to thank you for giving me the time. I really wish Rachel had shown up, because contrary to what she may,
we're waiting for you, Rachel.
Oh, yeah, we're waiting. And I just want to say to everybody that tuned in, and
she what? Oh, Rachel. Okay, okay, Rachel shared this on X. I'm told by production here. I'm sure she added a little comment, some thoughtful commentary to it. But good on her. Okay. All right.
Well, that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah. All right,
You got to
well,
go into clubhouses like I, as a conservative, I do. I go into the left's clubhouses all the time. I did almost a decade on CBC Power and Politics with Rosie Barton. So you've
I
got to go
remember
in and
watching
hold your
you
line and
do
hold
it.
your space.
Yeah, I
Yes.
for about 2 years did a CBC punditry job as well, and
I know.
and that was Calgary.
I know.
You were on the national one. That's much worse.
Oh,
Okay,
gosh.
well let's
Yeah.
put a pin in it there. Elise, thanks so much. This was a great conversation. I thought we maybe were going to go 20 minutes, assuming Rachel didn't show up. We've got an hour and 5 minutes here, and I think it was I think, at least in my humble opinion, this was a very thoughtful discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I thought it was very thoughtful and friendly.
All right, and thanks for everyone who joined us today. Thank you for joining us. westernstandard.news, where you can find us. Go there, click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access to all Western Standard content, getting past that paywall. And you'll be supporting the work that we are doing here between BC and Manitoba and all the great places in between. Thank you very much for joining us today. God bless.